The question is, are you ready?
What do you guys want to talk about?
Let me talk to you.
Throwdown Nation, we are back. It is 2025, and we are here with episode 65 of the Throwdown with Matt. It is a Tuesday. We are live on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter /X, Facebook, and Twitch. And tonight we are throwing down with a guy who is accomplishing big things in the worlds of both professional wrestling and music. He is a New York-based wrestler and is also the front man for metal band Lilac Abyss. He is the AntiHuman. He is Matt Anarchy. How you doing tonight, Matt?
Doing pretty good, Matt. Happy
Absolutely.
to be here.
Well, thank you, sir. I've been, like I said before we went live, I've been really looking forward to this. You know, as some of you guys know, I got my start in streaming, doing similar live stream chats with unsigned bands. So, you know, getting to talk to someone who is involved with both music and wrestling is just totally in my wheelhouse, and I'm just absolutely digging this opportunity. And, you know, somebody on Instagram commented that tonight is Matt and Matt talking about things that happen on a mat. And that just made me laugh. So, and for those of you that are watching this live, if you have any questions or comments, throw them in the chat. And, you know, all questions and comments will be read and answered. We'll do kind of an ongoing viewer Q&A session. So, you know, before we get into the meat and potatoes of things tonight, I'm going to go ahead and address the elephant in the room. Did you see the Monday Night Raw premiere on Netflix last night? And if you did, what'd you think?
I did watch it. I have a bit of mixed opinions on it. I felt like they wanted a pay-per-view presentation, but the runtime of the show didn't really warrant an episode of Monday Night Raw. It just felt very out of place with what we see on weekly television. The quality of the match is phenomenal. I have no bad thing to say about that, but it didn't feel like a Monday Night Raw.
I agree. You know, it was a great show for a spectacle. But I mean, you know, yeah, it definitely had a much different feel and different vibe than your normal Monday Night Raw. And, you know, hopefully, you know, after they've done a few of these and the newness has kind of worn off, hopefully things will settle back into a good pattern. Because, you know,
I'm sure they will. Triple H since he's taken control, it's been a flawless product, honestly.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm definitely excited to see where it's going to go. But like you know, I felt like it was almost overdone.
Yeah.
But you know, in some ways, they really didn't have a choice. You know, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression.
Oh,
so So anyway, we'll go ahead and get started with the first and most obvious question, and that is, how long have you been wrestling?
As of right now, I've been wrestling for roughly 3.5 years. I got my start in May of 2021. Most a bit on and off with it though, because um, over a little over a year into my career, I did sustain an injury. I shattered my collarbone during a training session, so that
Hmm.
put me out of action for about a year.
Gotcha. So, getting started kind of when you did, did you find a lot of impact with COVID and everything that was going on at the time?
For the first few months, I would say so, because where I was training, we would typically run shows once a month. But during this time, especially with the New York State Athletics Commission, we had to find ways around that to sort of have it to our niche audience, but not alert the higher ups. So we were kind of breaking the rules as we were going along. But a few months later, we didn't have to worry about that anymore, and things just went on like nothing happened.
Gotcha. So, and sort of, I guess the B side of the first question, how long have you been involved in music?
As long as I can remember, I grew up with two parents that both loved music and loved showing me music. Um, so around 2014, 2015, I started to dabble in making music. I started off more in the hip hop side of things, but gradually found my way back to rock and metal and all kinds of fun stuff like that.
Gotcha. Speed round.
All right.
Bandito.
Underrated.
Yeah. Underrated, and hopefully now that he's back from injury, he can hopefully make some big things happen in AEW and Ring of Honor.
Of course.
So, who actually trained you?
Um, I'd prefer not to mention the head trainer at the school I was at because we did have our problems, bunch of personal stuff, disrespecting family.
That's
But
fine.
some of the trainers there that I would be happy to talk about, uh, Chris Steeler, Mr. No Limits, Chris Banks. Um, Currently, where I'm wrestling, the King of Chaos, Logan Black, CPA. Um, and those are quite a few that are responsible for making me the wrestler I am today.
Got you. So, in the early portions of your training, what aspect of wrestling do you feel was the most challenging part?
So early on in my training, I'd have to say the hardest part was retaining spots that we would call. Um, as you would get to know me, you'd know that my memory isn't really the best. So having to remember drop down, leapfrog, shoulder tackle, arm drag, stuff like that is very, very hard for me. But what that I ended up taking a seminar with Nyla Rose where she broke it down saying that in wrestling, that's one of those things that you just have to get over is memorizing 7 million things at once. And after a while, once you start to understand the basics of, okay, what is the drop down? What is the leapfrog? That just becomes second nature. So memorizing those things becomes less of a challenge once it's stuck in the back of your head.
Gotcha. So, what would you say was the most valuable lesson that you learned in the early portions of your training? If you were wanting to pass something along to a new trainee from your earliest days of training, what would it be?
take whatever opportunity you can get. This was something taught to me by Jimmy Lloyd at a GCW show I attended. And he mentioned that he started off just by helping with ring crew before he even started training. And that gave him the keys to a lot of doors that he was able to open later on in his career. And I've noticed that with a lot of the promoters that I've helped out with, those have been the places where I've gotten the most bookings.
Gotcha. So I had, done a little bit of looking around on social media, and I found a short video on YouTube that I'm actually going to share my screen and play. It's a little vignette of Matt Anarchy being in a dark place. It's from Warriors of Wrestling. So I'm going to share my screen and play that just for people that aren't familiar with your work, so they can kind of get a little taste of what you do. Are you good with that?
Yep.
Okay.
Matt, boy.
Jalen!
Hey man, I've been looking all over for you. You ever see my calls or text? What's going on?
Brother! Relax.
What's going on?
You saw how we picked up the victory on Saturday.
Yeah.
You saw the record books only show the W for the anarchists. The mask. What was that? It talks to me, Jalen. It talks to me. This is the reason why we got the win. This is the one showing us the ways of the light. Should I say the dark? Jalen, you hear them at every show. Anarchy sucks. Anarchy sucks.
Yeah, I hear.
Anarchy sucks.
You know what?
And James, don't say it. Don't say it anymore. This mask is going to embrace that. And from now on, regardless of the match, do we bring the anarchy?
So what's the story behind that vignette? That was actually pretty cool.
Thank you. I wish I could agree, but I'm not too proud of that time in my career. That was so a little backstory with that. The promoter I was working at Warriors wanted me and my tag team partner Jalen to turn heel. Every month when we would wrestle there were these group of hecklers that all they would chant, "Matt, you suck, Anarchy sucks." So they figured the best option was for me to go heel. I never worked heel in my life before that. So I was trying to come up with like any like dark and like twisted way for it to work. Before that promo was cut, we had a tag match where I ended up cheating to win. I put my feet on the ropes. And unfortunately, that heel run never went anything because a week after I cut that promo, I shattered my collarbone.
Oh. Well, I'm sorry to bring up bad memories. I
No, it's fine.
definitely didn't mean to do that.
No, it's all fine. I'm here to talk about that stuff.
Well, cool. So, I'm presuming that you've been a fan of this stuff the majority of your life. Would you say that's accurate?
Definitely.
Well, what is your earliest wrestling-related memory?
Earliest wrestling related memory, I'd have to say I was 6 years old. And I wake up one morning, run into my dad's room, and out the window, there's like this communal space for the neighborhood. There's a wrestling ring set up with a couple of people in it just chaining around. So I get him to take me out there to see what's going on, and they show me a few things, end up letting me hold the belt, and since then I was hooked.
Very cool. Very cool. So was there a particular point that you can remember where you knew that you wanted to try to do this?
I would have to say it was that moment. First time I ever heard about wrestling, it just felt right.
Hmm. So from 6 years old, that's pretty cool to have that singular of a focus from that early of an age.
Yep.
That's pretty neat. So tell me about Lilac Abyss. How did that come about?
So two of the members in the band, both guitarists, the lead guitarist Adam and the rhythm guitarist Joe, I went to uh, junior high with. Didn't really speak to them, wasn't really close, but they later on they knew me as just the kid that made music. I during that time I was a wannabe rapper. Um, but then I ended up going more into punk metal. They were looking for a frontman for this band. I heard a few things about them. I wrote a song for them once, but they brought me in to just feel things out, practice with them. And since day one, it just, like with wrestling, it just felt right. And this was literally a month before we had our first gig. So it was crunch time since day one.
Got you. So aside from wrestling and music, what are some of your other hobbies and interests?
A big one for me for the past couple of years has been learning everything I can about The Sopranos. By far my favorite TV show of all time, and being from the New York, New Jersey area, I've been surrounded by it.
Oh, amazing series. I
Yeah,
mean,
phenomenal.
actually, I've been trying to get my son to watch I'm dying to rewatch The Sopranos, and I'm dying to get my son to watch it with me. So
Yeah,
uh,
I'm on like my fifth or sixth watch through of
convince
it.
him. So aside from the Sopranos, are you watching or listening to anything cool right now?
Um, I have been rewatching Heels a lot.
Hmm.
There's this show on FX about this rapper Lil Dicky called Dave that I've been getting into, and both very, very interesting.
So I know the name of the game in both wrestling and music is that you build things to the point where that stuff is basically paying your bills. Um, but I'm presuming at this point in your career that you still have an air quotes day job. Is that correct?
Day job, not really, because I'm still a full-time college student.
Ah,
Um, and with financial aid and everything, that's getting me by for now. But once this next semester ends, then the money runs out. So that's a priority of mine right now, which is also kind of a reason why I'm taking a temporary hiatus from wrestling so I could focus on that.
mm-hmm. So you had mentioned before we went on the air that you are New York born and bred.
Yep.
What is your favorite thing about New York?
I would say the opportunity that arises from being from a big city, whether it's wrestling or music, there's a million people that want to put me on, whether it's promoters, other bands wanting to play shows, wrestlers that I know that are like, "Hey, come down to this show," and help out. This is a good opportunity for you. But it's also a double-edged sword because with a lot of opportunity comes a lot of competition. As many promoters as there are, there's going to be more talent than that are all fighting for that one spot.
Gotcha. Speed round. PCO.
Big. I worked the show that he was on once, and he was a lot bigger on TV, but seeing him in person, that aura is huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to be his age and still be working at the level he's working at is really pretty astounding.
Oh, definitely. That's how I want to be when I'm that age.
For sure. So, they say that the best wrestling personas are yourself turned up to 11. So tell me a bit about in-ring Matt Anarchy and kind of compare and contrast him with everyday you.
So, as my career was starting off, I had more of this punk gimmick, which during that time I was huge into the New York hardcore scene, going to the Sunday matinee shows every other week, hanging out Tompkins Square Park, right around the block from CBGB's, and it was definitely an extension of who I was as a person. Then, as I had more time to reflect during my injury time, I ended up getting more into the metal side of things, specifically new metal, which is why if you watch any matches that I've had recently, I have like that very Slipknot inspired mask, come out with Flaw as my entrance music. And a lot of the names that I have for moves definitely stemmed from that side of my reality.
Mm-hmm.
Like my finisher, which is sort of like a half Nelson Bulldog. I call that Disaster Piece after the Slipknot song. I haven't pulled it out on a show yet, but I do a Three Amigos, but I call it $3 Bill, like the Limp Bizkit album.
Gotcha. So tell us about your very first match. What was it like? How did it go? What were your thoughts going into it, thoughts coming out of it, all that good stuff?
So my very first match came either 3 or 4 months after I started training. 4 months, yeah. It was where I trained. There's also a summer camp that is in that same space. So every
Mm-hmm.
year in August, the company puts on a show for all the kids in the summer camp. I was refereeing that show, but the storyline was that in between every match, all of the heels were messing with the referee. So for the main event, I ended up ripping off the referee's shirt and partaking in a 6-man tag match. And it was very nerve-wracking going into the day because I was aware that this was going to be my first ever impression in professional wrestling, aside from being an extra in promos for social media. But once I got in there, just everything else shut off and it was go time.
Gotcha. So, now that we've heard about the first match, tell us about your favorite match that you've been a part of.
May 14th, 2022, Brooklyn, New York. I fought one of my childhood favorites. This wrestler who goes by the name of Abdul Nasir. When I started attending independent wrestling shows, he was like the big foreign heel, even though he's not really foreign. So having that opportunity to wrestle someone that I grew up watching all the time definitely felt like a dream come true, but it also felt like I had something even more to prove during that match. And it was also my first time wrestling outside of my hometown, Staten Island. So it was a brand new audience, and we call the match. It goes fine, but with the way my trainer was, he was always looking for something negative to say and was always like just a very angry person. I get
Mm-hmm.
through the curtain after the match, and it's this set of stairs. I look up at him, and it's this most miserable, pissed off look on his face. So I'm thinking, oh great, what did I mess up on now? But
Yeah,
then
what
he
have I
comes
done?
but then he comes down the stairs, comes up to me and says, "Good match," and just walks off. So that definitely was a key factor in why it's one of my favorites.
Gotcha. Speed round. Karrion Kross.
Intelligent.
Yeah.
Every decision he makes with his gimmick, with the story that he has going on, whether it's Final Testament or his solo stuff, whether it was when he was still Killer Cross, every little
Mm-hmm.
decision matters. And I feel like that's a main reason why other great minds in professional wrestling, like Bray Wyatt, wanted to work with him so bad.
Yeah. Yeah, he in terms of just overall creativity, I would actually put him right up there with Bray Wyatt. It's a shame that he and Bray really didn't have the opportunity to work together that they could have. Because man, that would have been some absolutely beautiful storytelling. Those two guys putting their heads together and riffing off of each other, man.
Would have been some cinematic stuff.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Yeah, he's somebody that I'm really intrigued and excited to see where things are going to go for him.
Yeah.
Because yeah, he definitely has a mind for the business for sure. So, what is the longest you have ever driven to get to a match?
So driving, I would say none because I recently got my license.
Ah,
But traveled, I'd say around an hour and a half, almost 2 hours. I haven't really gotten far out of my little bubble here in New York, but but the first time I really got to go far was middle of New Jersey, so not too far. And it was
gotcha.
on this little farmland, wrestling in front of like a crowd of like 50, and then a couple of goats, sheep, and so it was a fun experience.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, the nice thing about being located somewhere like New York is there is so much opportunity in an environment like that you don't really have to go that far to get work. So,
Yeah. Although I would like to travel far to wrestle. There's a few states that are on my bucket list,
mhm.
like Tennessee, Texas, California, and then countries like Japan, the UK, um, France. They're definitely countries that I would like to wrestle in.
What about Japan?
Wait, I didn't mention Japan?
Did you?
I thought that was the first one I mentioned.
Maybe it was. I'm
Well, yeah,
uh
Japan is number one on that list
yeah.
because of
Yeah.
how wrestling it's not just something to watch. It's not just a sport. It is a culture to them, and that is something that I want to live by.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I actually just a couple of days ago I watched actually watched Wrestle Kingdom, and watched it with Japanese commentary. So that was kind of interesting, watching a match with commentary in a language that you do not understand. So I mean, more or less, I eventually just kind of muted the audio and just actually watched the match. And doing it that way actually really brings some interesting dimensions to a match, because you're sort of doing the commentary in your head,
Yeah.
So, but so I know everybody kind of has them. What would you say is your biggest in-ring pet peeve?
Calling A to Z. I hate when wrestlers call every single spot in every single match, when that is something that is not needed at all to tell a story and put on a good match. My typical way that I would call a match is start with the finish, work your way backwards, only call the finish, a key spot in between, and then the way you're going to start the match. Everything else, either body language or just calling it in the ring, can suffice.
Absolutely.
And
So
with calling it A to Z, if you forget a spot, the entire match is thrown off.
right. It's sort of like relying on a cookbook. I mean,
Yeah.
you can rely on a cookbook if you can cook, but
Yeah.
but that's actually a perfect segue to my next question, and that is, I know that there are really two major ways of preparing a match. You can either work it out with your opponent in the back, or you can call it in the ring, or you can kind of do a hybrid of both. Do you have a preference?
I've done both. I've trained with people where we would just put a match on the fly. We wouldn't even call the finish, and it's one of those things that is very difficult to do at the beginning, but once you get into that flow, it sort of becomes second nature, just like all of the other tricks and skills you need in order to become a professional wrestler. I'd say I prefer more calling it in the ring than calling A to Z, because all, like I mentioned before, you forget one thing, the entire match is thrown off. But if you call it in the ring, then you feel out what the crowd's enjoying, what they're not, and you could just like that shift whatever you need to do in order to make it work.
Absolutely. So over on YouTube, Joe Alberga says, "Love you, Matt Anarchy."
Oh yeah, that's the rhythm guitarist for Lilac Abyss.
Oh, nice,
Yep.
nice. So, here is a question that I don't know that it necessarily applies at this point, but it's a question I'll pose anyway. And that is, if you were working in other countries or cultures, how do you think you would handle language barriers when interacting with fans or working with local talent?
So when it comes to both of those, I feel this very simple solution is that wrestling's an international language. Obviously, certain things like I know in the lucha libre style, instead of working the left, it's working the right. Um,
Right.
that's a little barrier, but overall, wrestling is a very universal language. Body language is key to working with your opponent, and it doesn't take a certain language to understand a story. It doesn't take a certain language to understand the underdog, the babyface, the heel. Being a bad guy is universal. Being a good guy is universal. So as long as you know how to tell those stories without words, then you're good.
Absolutely. Speed round. Brian Cage.
Athletic.
Yeah.
For someone of his size, there are not many wrestlers that can do the things he can do. I put him in this very small bubble with the likes of Shane Mercer, and honestly, I wouldn't even know who else to, off the top of my head, I'd put in that category. But to be that size, to be a big man and flying around the ring like you're 100-something pounds, incredible.
Absolutely. Recently I've been kind of going down the Lucha Underground rabbit hole. I'm in the middle of season 2 right now, and so seeing some of Cage's earlier work has really been a lot of fun for me. Plus, that company had such an innovative way of presenting their product. They were really kind of the forerunners to some extent of a lot of the cinematic stuff that we're seeing now.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. So I've been really enjoying that, and I'm definitely that's been a rabbit hole of recent that I've really enjoyed delving into. So if you could only be one, would you rather be great in the ring or great on the mic?
So on one hand, if I'm great in the ring, I could easily they could just slap a mouthpiece on me and I wouldn't have to worry about that. But I feel like we're sort of seeing the bad side of that with the way AEW was handling Ricochet before the heel turn, where it doesn't take a genius to know that he's not the best promo out there.
No.
That's not a dig at the guy. I believe he's a very talented individual.
Oh, for sure.
But I feel like it depends on what company you end up working for, whether it's a more wrestling based company or a story based company. If I were to work per se WWE, I would prefer to be better on the mic than I would be in the ring, because with that, it's you do have the more casual audience that doesn't care about how many flips you could do, doesn't matter how good of a chain wrestler you are. As long as you can make them feel something, that's all that matters to them. But if I was working a company like AEW, TNA, GCW, those are companies where the in-ring product is a lot more prominent than the stories that make up the show. And I feel like that is more prevalent in wrestling as a whole. So I would have to say I would much rather be better in ring than on the microphone.
Got you. So what has been your most unusual encounter with a fan? It looks like you've got a story.
That's assuming that I have fans. But I wouldn't say any encounter has really been unusual. The unusual thing to me is the fact that, people actually recognize me. There were a few occasions, once at the first GCW Hammerstein show, where after the show, when everybody was like swarming the ring to get pictures with all the wrestlers, there was this one fan that said, "Hey, I saw you wrestle last week. Can I get a picture with you?" That shocked me. But where I did not expect to get spotted was at an Anthrax concert.
Really?
Yeah, for some reason, somehow at an Anthrax concert, someone just tapped me on the back of the shoulder and just said like, "Hey, are you Matt Anarchy?" And it was the weirdest thing, because to me, I'm just a normal guy. I'm not anything special, but to other people, I guess they see it as otherwise.
Gotcha. Well, over on YouTube, Michelle is saying, "My man."
Yep, that's my fiance. That is my ride or die. That is the Nancy to my Sid.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. You know, my wife and I just hit 26 years, and
Oh,
when you're with
congratulations!
when you are with the right person, dude, there is nothing like it. So I wish you and Michelle all the best.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All of the
And
photos you
then,
posted on Instagram with my valet, that's her.
oh, nice, nice. And then somebody named Cameron
Yep,
says,
that's my bass player.
"Oh, nice." So let's see here. So, do you have a preference yourself? You know, I think we sort of touched on this topic, but do you have a preference between working heel or babyface?
I'd say now I prefer to work heel, whereas earlier on I prefer to work babyface because when you're working babyface, your job is just to do your moves and
Hmm.
sell because that is how you gain your sympathy. Um, but as the heel, you have so much more freedom. You're the one that decides the structure of the match. You're the one that decides how the crowd is even going to react to the whole match because you're the one in between moves chewing the audience's ear off, talking all that smack. And yeah, so I'd definitely say working heel is my current preference.
Gotcha. So, and I know this type of thing happens more often than any of us realize, but can you share an example of a time during a match where something went sideways and you had to completely improvise?
That's like every match that I've been in. In wrestling, nothing ever goes the way you call it. And the good thing about that is that the fans don't know what you called in the back. So as long as you're willing to work on your feet and not have that oh shoot face, then you're good. But one example I would say, um, it's hard to really just think of one, but a big one was the first ever title match I had. It was for my home company's tag team titles. We had a spot where I was supposed to do a tope over the top rope
Hmm.
and get caught by both of my opponents. This was the second time I've ever done a dive like that, and I was extremely nervous. So I jumped my cue, dived way too early, landed right on one of my opponents, but like caught him right in the mouth, and he was bleeding a little bit. But if he didn't, my face would have just splat right on the ground, no padding, no
Mm.
nothing. So I owe my entire life to this guy, Max Bain. I love him to death. He's like my brother in professional wrestling. Um, but there after that spot, my tag team partner was also supposed to dive on all three of us. But during that spot, since I already had my opponent back in the ring, I was like, just no dive, no sorry, Jalen, no dive. And we
Gotcha.
just moved on from there. Just got to the next spot. Match moved on.
Gotcha. Speed round. Eric Young.
Unfortunate. I'd say he's a very unfortunate case in professional wrestling. I mean, I'd feel the same way about me if two of my brothers passed away at a very young age. Two of my brothers that made me that I wouldn't say made me famous, but came up together and became famous all together. And I'm just so glad now that with the Wyatt Six, with Bo Dallas, Uncle Howdy, whatever you want to call him, he's finally able to get that second chance that wasn't his fault for losing.
Right. So, in terms of your in-ring work and your promos, who or what would you say are some of your influences? And when I say what, I mean, do you find influences in pop culture, anything like that?
I would say, as weird as it sounds, the first two Korn albums are a lot of influence for my promo style. Definitely my delivery with my more recent promos has been the verses on Blind, which is their debut single. But when it comes to wrestlers that influenced me, biggest one has to be The Miz, mostly because he's someone that no matter if it's a job or if it's a main event or if it's a solid mid card guy, he's just there and he gets the job done.
Right.
And
Gotcha.
that's a lesson that, like I mentioned at the beginning, with just take any opportunity, help out where it's needed. That goes a long way.
Gotcha. So, do you have an all-time favorite match as a fan? A match that you can have watched it a million times and it just never gets old, and there's always some new little nugget you can pull from it.
I forgot exactly what event it was from, but Von Erich versus Ric Flair in the cage.
Which Von Erich?
I believe it was Kerry Von Erich
Okay.
versus Ric Flair in the steel cage. It was WCCW.
World class, yeah.
Yep. I've discovered that match about a year ago, and oh my God, they are both amazing workers. And especially during that era, the mid 80s, phenomenal.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it goes to show you that you don't need a million high spots in order to put on a phenomenal match.
Not at all. Not at all. 1980s Flair, when he was truly in his prime, you couldn't touch that guy. I mean, he really and truly was the man. And, one of my favorites, and I'll pass this along to you in the event that you haven't seen this match. Back around 1989, Flair did an I Quit match with Terry Funk on I believe it was a World Championship Wrestling Clash of the Champions. If you have not seen that match, you must. I mean, it is a master class in psychology and storytelling. So if you haven't seen that match, go out of your way to find it. It is phenomenal.
I've got something to watch after this. All right.
Yeah, absolutely. You'll thank me later.
I'll thank you right now because that already sounds like a phenomenal match.
Oh, it is tremendous. So, and this can be present day or past. Who would be a dream opponent for you? Who would Matt Anarchy love to work?
There's a few names that come to mind. Obviously, The Miz being my all-time favorite. I would love to work a match with him. But because what made me fall back in love with wrestling after a period of me sort of phasing out of it, I will say Nick Gage is a dream opponent because him and deathmatch wrestling as a whole is what got me back into professional wrestling.
Got you. Speed round. Joe Gacy.
I know I already used this answer for Karrion Kross, but intelligent, another very creative mind in professional wrestling, especially with his later time in NXT right before he got the call up with the Wyatt Six. Phenomenal character work right there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm and I feel like it is really a nice tribute of sorts that they pulled him in to the Wyatt Six gimmick. You know, they really did a good job bringing the right people into that faction.
Oh,
Uh,
definitely.
so yeah.
Oh, I remember Gacy from his CZW days, and even then,
Hmm.
character work was phenomenal.
For sure. For sure. So, what is your favorite move? What is a move that you just absolutely love to do? And on the flip side of that, is there a move that you either won't do or would rather not do? And that can be either giving or receiving.
All right, so favorite move, I will say, is my half Nelson Bulldog. Either that or the Code Red. The half Nelson Bulldog because when I was looking for a new finisher to use, that one, and I was workshopping a bunch of different things, that one just felt right out of any other move I've ever done. And the Code Red because that was my very first finisher. I grew up a huge Amazing Red fan. Being from the New York area, you have House of Glory, which is a bridge away from me. And watching all of that early X Division stuff definitely made me want to use that move. I ended up wrestling one of his students, and he no-sold it for some reason. But
Hmm.
that's neither here nor there. But a move that I hate and I would never do again. It's not that I hate the move itself. I hate the way I execute the move. Top rope moonsault. I at training hit it perfectly, but once I got out in front of a crowd, the nerves kicked in, and it sort of looked more like the way Bam Bam Bigelow and Vader used to do it, except I don't have the size that Bam Bam Bigelow or Vader have. I look like I should be able to hit it flawlessly, but I ended up rotating too much to the side and landed on my opponent's I think thigh, and it looked weird, it felt weird, and it's just something that I'm not going to do again.
Gotcha. So, I'll bring up something that you were mentioning just a little while ago, and it's an interesting little side topic I want to sort of go down with you, and that is, you know, you were mentioning the recent heel turn by Ricochet. How are you liking that? I'm digging it myself, you know, because we really, I mean, I think he did some heel work over in Japan and possibly some in Ring of Honor, but seeing this aspect of Ricochet, I'm actually really kind of digging it.
So I just got to preface first by saying I don't watch AEW. I so from what I see, it's stuff that's either sent to me by friends or stuff that I come across on social media. And when Ricochet first debuted with the company, and they were giving him the microphone, a lot of the reaction I heard was very negative. So the fact that I'm seeing after this heel turn that that all the fans are doing a complete 180 and are behind him, that must mean he's doing something right.
Absolutely. So, you've been doing this long enough that this probably applies. What hurts right now?
My back, my right knee, my left ankle, my neck, always my collarbone now.
Gotcha.
It's easier to say what doesn't hurt.
Right, right. So, you know, you were mentioning the collarbone. You know, I'm presuming that is, at least to this point, and hopefully, you know, going forward, the most significant injury that you have suffered.
Yeah.
How actually did that happen?
So I was at training one night and we were going over all the different types of pins. So you have the backslide, you have the roll up, schoolboy, crucifix. And when I tried the crucifix, I thought, what if I could turn this into a move? And I noticed that Darby Allin did it, where instead of like a crucifix pin, it's a crucifix slam.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up working with one of my trainers to get it right. I do it right, and then once I ask one of my coworkers to film it for me, hit the ropes, go for the move, and I side bump it, but then you hear like a clapping sound. I didn't know what it was at first, but then I feel this thing poking straight out of my shoulder, and
Mm.
it turns out I shattered my collarbone right then and there.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A week before my next match, so it was like, ugh, couldn't have happened
Oh,
after.
no.
But I will say it was also a blessing in disguise because, as I mentioned before, the falling out I had with my head trainer, it did
Mhm.
give me the out of professional wrestling that I did need. It did. It gave me the out of that company that I needed, and I'm 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 thankful it happened because I wouldn't have known my own body's limits if it wasn't for that injury.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah. Many, many years ago, prior to what I'm currently doing career wise, I actually used to be a firefighter paramedic. So I know how bad a broken collarbone can be. And man, it's, you know, some of the worst pain I've seen my patients in was from collarbone injuries. So man, I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, now every time like the weather gets too cold, since I have the metal plate on it, it just is
Aches.
the worst pain I could ever imagine, and it happens out of nowhere.
Hmm. Speed round. Keith Lee.
For lack of a better term, lazy. I have nothing against the guy's in-ring work. I feel like he is a phenomenal worker, but from what I know about him is mostly his time in WWE, where you see cases like Gunther where they wanted him to lose the weight and he did. And look at him now, longest reigning intercontinental champion of all time, current world heavyweight champion. Whereas with Keith Lee, now I could be 100% wrong because I'm not backstage with these guys. I'm not there with them knowing what's going on. But from everything I've heard, it was the fact that he didn't want to change to fit the product and the image that they wanted for him at the time. And as I've mentioned before with The Miz, I'm all for doing the job, doing what management needs of you, and that's how you get by. He's I don't know if he's making it work in AEW. Some days I hear he's doing really good. Some days I hear that they're not really treating him like a priority, but I feel like if he went the Gunther route and changed the way that WWE wanted him to, I feel he could have definitely been in a lot more of a successful position.
Absolutely. So, in general, what are your thoughts on the current state of the wrestling business?
Phenomenal. There's so much wrestling out there, and with the competition comes innovation. There's so much new stuff happening. There's more eyes on wrestling than ever before in the past 20 years. And I feel like this new boom period is what's really going to take wrestling from being this niche hobby to being a household thing.
Gotcha. And what is your take on the role that social media is playing as a promotional tool in wrestling?
So it's good you asked me this because back in high school, I did focus a lot on different types of media, whether that's print, television, radio, and social media. And I see it as just another promotional tool, another type of media. You see now with WWE having Speed on X. Um, it definitely brings a lot more eyes on professional wrestling. It brings a new form of engagement within the fandom. And overall, I feel like it's a very, very positive thing for professional wrestling to have this new medium to promote itself.
Gotcha. You know, speaking of all of that, I'll take a moment, and anybody that is currently watching this live, you know, if you like what we're doing here, definitely give it a thumbs up, follow, subscribe, whatever platform you're watching this on. You know, it definitely helps, and this whole thing is really growing at a pretty amazing rate, and I'm definitely grateful for where things are, but I'm excited to continue to grow as well. So you know, anybody definitely definitely take a second to do that. It definitely helps. So, you know, you're still a pretty young guy, but if you could, knowing everything that you know at this point in life, if you could give any advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Don't take nothing from no one. There's a lot of people in this industry that see it as a competition instead of a an opportunity to build each other up and build the sport up as a whole. There's a lot of negativity that comes within the scene of professional wrestling. Shady promoters, shady talent. Don't don't listen to those people. I've encountered a lot of them, and it definitely led me the wrong direction a lot of times in my career, where I'm noticing my first run with professional wrestling, I was wrestling somewhere that, as much as the old school style of wrestling was very safe, very much story driven, and it definitely conveyed emotion in the audience, the where the industry is today is not where it was in 1980. Um, and during my second run, which only lasted a couple of months, I literally just got back into the ring this past June.
Mhm.
I've had so many more opportunities in that small time than I did ever before wrestling at other places.
Gotcha. So, speed round, and it's kind of funny. I was looking at my list of speed round names for tonight, and interestingly enough, one of them it turned out was the Miz, and I already know how you feel about the Miz.
Genius,
So,
genius, genius.
absolutely. So, the name that I was going to bring up instead is Matt Sydal.
Wow. That's all I could really say about Matt Sydal, whether it was his time as Evan Bourne or before and after as Matt Sydal. Just wow. He definitely brought something new to the game that was kind of seen before, but not to the levels that he brought it to. Whenever you think of an RKO out of nowhere, what's the first thing one to come to mind? Out of Airborne.
Yep.
Despite him not being with the company for over 10 years now, that is still he made a huge impact on that as a whole. And on a personal level, I love the guy. I was 10 or 11 years old at a Ring of Honor show, and he was my favorite wrestler at the time. The backstage area was open-ish, like you could see backstage, but the fans couldn't go there. He was sitting on one of the benches in the backstage area. I asked the security guard if I could get a picture with him. The security guard said no, so I went back to my seat. When I was at my seat, Matt Seidel went over to the security guard and told him to grab me so I could get a photo with him. So that will forever stick with me as why he's one of my favorites.
What a good human being.
Oh,
I mean,
of course.
to take the time to do something like that is, man, that's impressive.
Yeah, 5 seconds, and I remember it all these years later. It's
Yep.
goes to show how big of an impact wrestlers have on this world.
For sure. And just little things like that can make all the difference in somebody's life and trajectory, because if he hadn't done that, who knows if you would have continued, wholeheartedly down the road you've gone.
Yeah.
So, do you have any pre-show traditions, rituals, superstitions, any things that you try to do consistently before you go through the curtain?
Honestly, I don't feel like I have the time to do that when I'm backstage. Most of my time is just discussing the match with my opponent and then just me trying to remember the few spots that we did call. If I do get a moment in there, I will just psych myself up, a little smacking myself around, getting myself in the zone. So nothing that I do every single match, but if I find the time, it gets me into character.
Gotcha. So something that we've done in all of these that's just been kind of fun is we've let the current guest pose a question for the next guest. So one of my previous guests, a wrestler out of North Carolina by the name of Tommy Okami, posed this question, and that is, what are you doing currently to make yourself a better performer?
Well, in college, I did take up a drama minor during the time that I was injured.
Mhm.
So while I can't progress the skills in ring, I can progress the other skills that come with being a professional wrestler, speaking skills, acting, because at the end of the day, professional wrestling is a sport of acting.
Right.
So I will say every chance I get, just character work, character work, character work. That's a big thing because if you don't understand your character, no one else will.
Absolutely. So since this is part of a series, do you have a question that you would like to pose to the next guest? And I can go ahead and tell you my next guest tomorrow night, I've got a wrestler from here in the metro Atlanta area by the name of Chris Del Rey. And the question doesn't have to be particular to him, obviously. But do you have a question that you would like to pose?
When it comes to the two main types of wrestling in the United States, you've had the Southern style, which is more like studio audience based, working in front of the same crowd consistently. That compared to the more northern style where it's touring around different arenas, wrestling the same opponent over and over again, same exact match. Which does he prefer?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because I've noticed that working the same person over and over again, it builds the chemistry with that individual. But once you're working more and more with other people in front of the same crowd, you can't pull out the same tricks every single match. So it leads to innovation in your own moveset, in your own style of wrestling.
Got you. So we're pretty much toward the end of things now. So, do you have any upcoming shows or anything at all that you'd like to give some hype to?
Currently, the show that I have coming up is with my band Lilac Abyss, March 8th, Mother Pug's Saloon, Staten Island, New York.
Nice, nice. Um, so tell us a little bit about Mother Pugs.
It's the one of the main local venues that puts on for heavier music, whether it's punk rock or metal. Um, the main promoter there, Jeff and Rage, he's definitely a big scene within people in the alternative community of Staten Island, and we've done a few shows with him, and I look forward to working with him more in the future.
Gotcha. Somebody named Adam Lyles.
Oh,
Is that
that's
another bandmate?
Yep, our lead guitarist.
Nice, nice. Yeah, he said he loves you and let's go.
Yeah.
And so anyway, as far as what we've got coming up here at the Throwdown, like I said, tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern, we've got episode 66 with Chris Del Rey, who is a Georgia-based wrestler. And then on Saturday, the 11th at 7 p.m. Eastern time, we've got episode 67, another Georgia-based wrestler, Malcolm Marks, who he's out of WWA 4 here in Atlanta. And then on Sunday, the 12th at 2 p.m. Eastern time, we've got the premiere of the Wrestling Roundtable. And this is basically going to be a panel discussion show with a panel composed of some indie wrestlers, fans, and other folks associated with the business. And basically, we're just going to be nerding out about wrestling and just kind of discussing the latest shows, industry news, that kind of thing. It's just more or less just going to be a, like I said, panel discussion type show. Just some different types of content that we're kind of experimenting with. But anyway, so that's kind of what's coming. Matt, I want to thank you for your time. This has been a real pleasure. I really believe you've got a bright future ahead of you, and I'm definitely excited to watch your career from afar and see where it all goes for you.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this.
Well, I hope it was a decent experience.
Oh, it's a phenomenal experience.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And, for those of you that have been watching this live, thank you. For those of you that'll be seeing this on replays and clips on the web, thank you for that. As I said, if you like what we've got going here, definitely spread the word, give it a thumbs up, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Every little bit helps. And like I said, we'll be back tomorrow night at 7. And in the meantime, be good to each other, love each other, and keep throwing down.